Here we are at last. It's season 11, episode 30 of the Ubuntu podcast. In this episode, we're going to discuss installing lots of Linux distros in VirtualBox. We'll also have some newfound love, and we'll go over your feedback. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Alan.
Hello.
Hello. And Martin.
Whatcha?
Martin, what have you been doing recently?
Well, I have been futzing about with ffmpeg, particularly inside a snap. So a few months ago, I made a snap of ffmpeg that had NVIDIA hardware encoding support in it. And I needed the assistance of the security team at work in order to create new interface changes to enable a confined ffmpeg snap to poke at NVIDIA GPUs to do this hardware encoding stuff. And at the sprint in Brussels a couple of weeks ago, I added support for VA API, which is the way that Intel and AMD can access the hardware encoding capabilities. And without the assist, or with some assistance from the Ubuntu security team, I made the necessary changes to Snapd in order to unlock that capability. So in a Snapd release coming to you very soon, you'll be able to install the ffmpeg snap and encode on NVIDIA and AMD and Intel. Excellent. And the improvements are quite astonishing.
It seems to be a bit of a theme that AMD and Intel use some sort of common standard while NVIDIA is off doing the same thing, doesn't it?
It is a bit of a meme, yes.
What sort of difference do you get in encoding times for like comparatively between the different GPUs?
So on my CPU in my XPS 15, if I encode just on the CPU, my sample clip, which is the trailer for Serenity, it takes 190 seconds to encode that in 8 threads on the CPU. And obviously on the same package, because it's an IGP, using the hardware facilities, it takes 18 seconds. So wow. Quite a considerable improvement. And on the same laptop using the NVIDIA GPU, because it's got a 960M in it, it takes about 8 seconds. So NVIDIA still wins over the other two, but nevertheless, significant performance improvements.
Nice. That's really good. Yeah. Good to see that land in the ffmpeg snap. And yeah. I guess there's going to be other thing. I've been wanting to add this encoding support to the OBS snap as well. So will I be able to consume that somehow?
Yeah, so that's the next thing. Once this lands in a released version of Snapd, then yeah, we'll expose ffmpeg over a content interface so that the OBS Studio snap can consume that and get all of that hardware acceleration goodness. But also I want to use it selfishly in Pod Publish, which we use for encoding and releasing this show. So it will speed up the encode times for creating our videos that go up to YouTube.
And potentially video editors and other tools could use it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that I'm most interested in is Shotcut. That's my video editor of choice. So I should be doing some work with them and their snap to embed this in Shotcut as well. But Caden Live could have this and OpenShot as well. Anything that needs ffmpeg or its libraries.
Nice. Right. Well, on that note, let's get on with the show. Now, Alan, I noticed that over the past week, you've been posting lots of screenshots to our Telegram channel about installing various distros and how you've been getting on well and not so well with some of them. So what's that all about then?
So I've been running various distros in VirtualBox for a while now, mostly to do things like testing snaps and Snapcraft on various distros. But I kind of messed them up a little bit and they're all in a bit of a mess. So I thought I'd start again and create a whole bunch of new VMs. So those screenshots are posted because I created a whole bunch of new VMs. And I know Martin had a similar setup as well and wanted to create some VMs. And it was just fun seeing the experience of installing all these different distros from the perspective of someone who's really recently only ever installed Ubuntu. And it's quite surprising the differences.
Yes. I mean, I can't remember when I last installed something that wasn't Ubuntu and wasn't using the Ubiquity installer. I mean, I have been using it since before then, when it was basically a slightly nicer version of the Debian installer. But what sort of range of experiences have you had from the various things you've tried?
So good to bad. Like some of them are just more beautiful and ask you simpler questions and are just more friendly, whereas other of them are really brutal and expect you to know how to use the installer, like expect you to know the ins and outs of the installer and what to press next and stuff. So it really ran the whole gambit from like nice and friendly and aimed at new users to new users are not welcome here. Get lost. This is for experts kind of thing. It was quite a range.
So I followed your lead on this because you made a purchase on Amazon in order to facilitate this, because you were running out of disk space on your laptop, and I was as well.
That was part of the trigger. Was I was running low on disk space, and I thought I'll just put these externally on a USB drive, and that'll be fine.
And that works surprisingly well, right? So what did you buy?
I bought some spinning Rust. Only a terabyte of spinning Rust, which is enough for like 40 odd VMs, which is enough for what I need.
Right.
Yeah, I've just put it in a USB 3 enclosure and it's just sat on the desk plugged into a USB port. You know, I could have gone faster. I could have got something better, but that's enough because generally all I want to do is boot the thing up, install a few snaps, make sure they work and shut it all down again afterwards. And that's it. And it's good enough for that.
Yeah. So you told me that you'd bought this drive and that's what you were going to do. And I have a 1 terabyte M.2 SSD that came out of a laptop, and I put that in a USB enclosure, and I was using that. And I think both of us have found, regardless of the comparative performance differences, that actually doing that over USB 3, it's pretty much equivalent to using an internal disk in the computer, and it works really well.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I moved the VirtualBox VMs folder that's on my home directory. Long ago I'd moved that to the root disk because my home disk was running out of space. So actually the VirtualBox VMs folder in my home directory was just a link to a folder on another disk. So moving it again to this external USB drive wasn't any heartache because I just moved it and then just changed the symlink to point to the external drive. But what I also did was I moved all the config for VirtualBox to the external drive, which is in .config VirtualBox. I moved that to the external drive. So now actually I can unplug that drive and take it to a completely different computer. And so long as the two symlinks are there, I can plug it in when it mounts, launch VirtualBox, and I can see all the same VMs on a completely different machine. So they're actually very portable.
Yeah, and this was the catalyst because you and I were both going to the Sprint in Brussels and going to be using different laptops for a week, and we needed all of these VMs available. Yeah. So again, following what Alan had done, I went a slightly different route. I changed in the VirtualBox preferences, I changed the path to the default virtual machine folder to point at the USB drive. And then I put all of my virtual machines in there and just did, add a machine, here's the VDI, add a machine, here's the VDI. And then you symlinked your VirtualBox config, and I use Yadim, which is a .file manager, and I just checked in my Yadim config and then was able to check that out on the other laptops I wanted to use. So now I just plug my USB disk in with all of my VMs on it, and when I start VirtualBox, it just automatically discovers them all, and I'm off to the races.
Yeah, and I mentioned that on Mastodon over the weekend that I'd installed something like 23 distros, and someone pointed out that even at 1 hour each, that's taking up quite a bit of your entire weekend to install them all. But actually, I was doing them in parallel because each VM, I was only giving them 4 gig of RAM. So I actually had 2 running at a time while one is installing, another one's doing updates or vice versa. Yeah. And then once they finish installing, take a snapshot. So I've got a snapshot of every single one of those distros as they were, clean install, or, clean install plus creating a user in some cases, or, and then take another snapshot once I'd done updates on all of them. So,
and also as we heard from Will Cook, when he was talking about the Ubuntu metrics, we know that on average, an Ubuntu install takes about 17 minutes or something. And most of these other distributions install in a similar time frame. So,
well, some of them do. Some of them were just painfully slow.
Wasn't it though? Yeah, some of them are really quick. OpenSUSE.
So come on, stop being coy. Which ones were slow?
We are naming names then. Yeah,
OpenSUSE was remarkably slow. I installed 6 other distributions in the time it took to install OpenSUSE.
I think it's because of the way most distributions these days are image-based, or some of them at least. All the Ubuntu ones are image-based, so they just like splat an image down on the drive or splat files down. Whereas the installer that OpenSUSE uses, for whatever reason, serially installs a bunch of RPMs. Like much like the Debian installer did back in the day.
Does the OpenSUSE installer still give you like lots of options for like which desktop you want and things like that?
Yeah, if you download the 4 gig ISO, you get all of the options. And when presented with that, actually, and this is another exception, when presented with the options, I went with the defaults on every distro except OpenSUSE, where I unpicked its whole BTRFS and went with ext4 because experience tells me when you install OpenSUSE in a 32 gig VM, the second time you add a load of updates, all of the metadata will eat itself and you'll end up with an unusable VM. So I threw all of that away and just used ext4.
Yeah, I think I used XFS for mine, but I've been bitten by that on SUSE before. Like, just installing updates, suspend the machine, wake it up again, do some more updates, and then the Btrfs snapshots just eat all the disk. And then you have to go and use this snapper utility to go and clean it all up. And it's a horrible mess. And I just can't be dealing with that. And I find any distro where I have to become a sysadmin is not interesting to me. I want to use it from the perspective of a user. And I know some people like those distros because they like to get down and dirty, with the nuts and bolts, and fair enough, but I don't. I'm using it from the point of view of someone doing a bit of QA. So I'm not interested in that.
So beyond the actual speed of the installers, did everything kind of work? Were there any actual problems with things like installers not working or not like working in VirtualBox correctly, or things like that?
Some of them knew about VirtualBox out of the box. Like 1 or 2 of them had an option in the menu that said, install inside VirtualBox. And
that's nice.
You resize the window and it's like 1080p, and you get the full size desktop in the window. A lot of them didn't. In fact, some of the Ubuntu derivatives would give you a 800 by 600 window.
If you're lucky. In my case, 740 by 312.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a result of whether they kind of come with the guest editions or not.
I don't think you need the full guest editions. It's just the VirtualBox X driver.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Which there is a driver in the archive for that, and I don't know whether everyone ships it or some do and some don't. But the interesting thing for me is having seen the stats from Will that he posted on the blog about how popular VMs are just for Ubuntu. Kind of makes you think maybe more distros should be shipping that, because a lot of their users will be trying stuff out in things like VirtualBox. It probably is prudent for them to add those VirtualBox extensions.
So one evening in Brussels last week, we did sit down with Will and Ken Van Dyne from the desktop team and showed them what we'd been working on and showed them some of the rough edges we'd encountered, and they're going to be working on improving that sort of out-of-box experience when you're on VM environments. And that Hyper-V thing that we spoke about last week is sort of, those first steps towards that.
The one distro of all of them that we've avoided for months, and we've attempted a couple of times and then just given up, is Gentoo.
Didn't fancy compiling everything from source.
Right, ain't nobody got time for that. And so I actually didn't go with Gentoo at all. I've tried it before and I just didn't like it. And so I thought, well, why don't I try one of the derivatives? So I tried Sabayon because I'd heard of it. I Googled for Gentoo derivatives.
Kind of biscuit, isn't it?
I don't know. The logo is like a foot, like a 3-fingered bird's foot. I don't know what it is, but I managed to get that installed. But boy, oh boy, that's a quirky old desktop. That is. Their update manager is bizarre. Go and have a look at my Twitter from.
Was this the one with all the funny buttons?
Yeah, it's got loads of buttons, like, to dismiss things. It's got buttons called OK then, and ignore and really ignore, and it's just really quirky and bizarre.
What I would have given for your quirky buttons, because I went full board Gentoo, or at least tried to. So I did my first Gentoo install in possibly 13 or 15 years, and I reminded myself why it is Gentoo isn't for everybody and is for some people. It was more work than I just wanted to get something done, and Gentoo is not for that use case. Gentoo is for you creating an artisanal distribution specifically for your use case with everything compiled precisely as you want it, including the kernel flags and the kernel options and all the rest of it. And I went through all of this, and I've still got this Gentoo image, but it doesn't work as I would want it to.
My Sabayon install works and is all fully up to date, despite all the buttons and the quirky messages. I'm quite excited for the rest of the adventure with Sabayon. The next time I boot it up, I can't wait to find out what new buttons. I posted a screenshot online and someone replied, "Wait a minute, did you edit this?" And I was like, no, this is a genuine screenshot. So, oh dear. But the flip side is some of the distros install really quickly and are really easy to install, very pleasant to install. Did you have any pleasant surprises, Martin?
I did actually. I've got some feedback. So the things that surprised me that I really enjoyed were Deepin. I think I installed 15.7, and I think that is beautiful. I think that there is a lot going on there that is really right. And if you've never installed Deepin, and you are, a Linux enthusiast or a Linux desktop enthusiast, then definitely fire up a VM and have a go with Deepin. There is a lot to be learned there for distro maintainers the world over. A really high quality experience, and I was very impressed.
Yeah, that was top of my list for install experience. It was just pretty.
Yeah,
it was a really, really nice experience, really easy, very friendly. The messages weren't aggressive or terse. There weren't too many buttons. It was it was really, really nice. I quite enjoyed Deepin. Yeah.
And you talked about like that whole, are you in a VM? Are you on hardware? The first time I booted Deepin, having been installed in a VM, it went, oh, heyo, looks like you're in a VM. Would you like, the accelerated low graphics mode because you're in a VM, or do you want all of the whizzy whiz, animation? So it was the first thing it prompted you, on the first, and just everything about it is really
right. But that dialogue wasn't just like two radio buttons or a switch. It was two pretty pictures, with just a couple of words underneath that made you like understand what that meant. I can see as a user, you might appreciate that. I was quite impressed with that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So another distro that I was impressed with, and this is mostly to do with its theming. There's a distribution called Parrot, which is a derivative of Ubuntu Unstable, and it has a color scheme based around the colors of a parrot's feathers. And I noticed that color scheme was echoed throughout their UI, including in the console and the defaults for the system monitors in the bar, just everywhere. That red, yellow, blue, green sort of color accents were accurately reflected throughout the whole distro.
Know. I looked at that and it looked like someone had thrown a box of crayons at the screen. Really, I didn't like that.
You may not like the choice of colours, but what I appreciated is that somebody had sat down, they'd decided this was their colour palette, and they had used it consistently everywhere. And I just thought, this is a team of people that are giving some thought to this stuff. There were other things about Parrot that I found that were a bit rough, but generally I was really impressed.
The only distro that I had to ask for technical support for, and got it, was Pop OS from System 76.
Oh, right.
Pop, yes. Pop OS. It fell apart in 50 shades. During the install, it just like fell over. And, I wasn't immediately clear to me that you could press a button to open a terminal and see what the error messages were, but I figured that out, and I posted a screenshot in their Telegram chat late on like a Sunday, and Emma popped up and said she would she asked me what I was doing, and I explained the problem, and she gave me a suggestion, and I tried that out, but she also said she would let the developers know, and but just hitting the retry button worked, and it just started from the beginning and reinstalled, and everything was fine. So yeah, I ended up, none of them failed to install. They all installed. Ask me again in a couple of months whether they're all still working or not, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, I didn't
Excellent.
try Pop OS. So of the distros you installed, was there anything unusual or something that you expected to work that didn't work?
Unusual. I don't know.
Well, there was two things that I noticed. The first was when you're running the installer, a large number of distros don't actually prompt you to eject the install media at the end of the install process.
Yeah, that irritated me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand why that is. They like some of them rebooted, and then I found myself rebooting back into the live image. And, you know, I made a comment online about this, like, why do so many distros not eject the CD? And some wag pointed out, yeah, it's probably not a CD, but it doesn't have to be a CD. All it has to do is send the eject signal, and then the virtual machine actually does eject the ISO. So it's not an actual CD. I appreciate that in 2018. But yes, I agree. Now you've reminded me of that. That was a minor frustration, and it was a bit weird because I had to go in and eject the CD myself. But it was a minor thing.
A minor frustration that most distributions have. So if you're a distro maintainer, please add eject CD at the end of the install. But the major frustration for me was Control-Alt-T is barely a thing outside of the Ubuntu ecosystem.
Yeah, I've moaned about this before, and a few people said, "Oh, that's an Ubuntuism. Nobody uses that. That's just not a thing." And I don't know. Is it? Is it something that I've just, because I've used Ubuntu for 10 plus years, it's ingrained on me that Control-Alt-T opens a terminal. I know in some distros it's Super T instead of Control-Alt-T, but yeah, I agree.
The fact that shortcut. So I'll tell you this, right? In the very early days of Ubuntu Mate, the very first bug we had raised on Launchpad for Ubuntu Mate was Control-Alt-T doesn't launch the terminal. It's the very first bug. And a friend of ours who used to work at Canonical, Ted Gould, once said, Control-Alt-T should be an ISO standard. And I agree, because every time I boot one of these things, I immediately hit Control-Alt-T. And with the exception of Manjaro and KDE Neon, outside of the Ubuntu family, none of the other distributions actually honor that. Oh, no, actually, Deepin does. Another reason why I loved Deepin. But it's super frustrating. Control-Alt-T. It's a setting in most window managers and settings daemons. It should be configured.
Right. Well, let us know if you've been installing strange distros in your VMs or on various spare hardware you have lying around. And if you came across anything strange you're amusing, you can email the show. And I think that in a few minutes' time, Laura will tell you how to do that.
That GUI love. If there's an app that you've been using that you just have to tell everyone about, email your GUI love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
And we've got a very special love for you this week because Alan has some newfound love.
Yeah, people have been telling me for ages that Travis is great for doing continuous integration, and I ignored them, and I didn't accept the love of Travis. And then last week, Sergio, who I work with on the Snapcraft team, showed me the wonders that are Travis CI, and now I'm Travising all the things. So
2 questions.
Yep.
What's Travis and what's continuous integration?
So people do pull requests against projects that I work on, and sometimes I have to go and rebuild that software to find out whether their pull request is valid or not, and make sure that the software still builds and the software still functions. Why would I, as a human being, waste my time doing that when there are computers that can do that for me? That's what Travis is, and that's what CI does. Is it will monitor your project for pull requests being made, and when it spots one, it grabs the software, fires up a machine, and then starts building your software. And then you, as a human, can look at the logs and say yes or no, it passed or didn't. In fact, Travis will set a flag in GitHub to say whether it passed or not. And if it did pass, you can grab the resulting binary, or in my case, the resulting snap, and test it out. Oh. So it saves time and means I don't have to do so much manual stuff. Now, I know many of you who have used Travis and other CI systems will currently be shouting at the screen, Alan, keeping up, 2018. Yes, you're right. But I've only just discovered the wonder that is Travis, and I love it. So,
and it's like a software as a service thing built into GitHub, isn't it? It's not like Jenkins where you have to have a server running locally with it installed. Yeah,
it's a third party, and you can just hook it up to GitHub super easily. It's a paid service if you want more machines or higher spec machines or lots of other like interesting things, but just the absolute bare basics. You only get a certain number of minutes runtime for each build, so sometimes they time out if it's a really particularly big build, but I haven't had many time out yet. And actually that's kind of a good thing, because it means I need to shrink my projects down a little bit if they're taking too long to build in Travis. But so my love for this week is all about Travis.
There's always room for more feedback. On our website, each episode has its own comments, so post yours on ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it's time for that wonderful feedback. And first up, Darren O'Connell emailed us at show@ubuntupodcast.org.
I decided to reach out to you because I am the technology decision maker for a gaming startup. My company initially decided to do a native Linux build for our flagship game, Holiday Wars Battle of the North. After the Proton announcement, I decided to review it as an option to save our limited resources. While I think it's a good idea, I feel that native is the way to go for our current game, and I'm willing to put in the effort to support my platform of choice. Well done, Darren.
Yeah, it's interesting to actually hear that point of view, that there is still game companies aren't just saying, Proton, no point in doing a Linux build. There's actually people who can actually see a value in having a native Linux port. Next, Paul Waring emailed us.
I tried creating a snap recently for Composer, the PHP dependency management system. I thought Snap would be a good choice for software that's released too frequently for an LTS release to keep up, but it looks like Snap doesn't use or work with Debian's alternative systems, whereby symlinks are created to Etsy alternatives to allow multiple versions of PHP or Java, etc. to be installed at the same time. Is Snap the right use case, or is a PPA better? Right. Couple of things here. You can use the alternative systems within a Snap build system if you need to configure a particular version of a compiler or what have you. And the way to facilitate what you're looking for, which is to build your software multiple times with different versions of PHP embedded inside it, is to use a facility of snaps called tracks. And that would enable you to separate out multiple releases of the same version of your software that have different components embedded within it.
There you have it. Sam Mora emailed us.
In the most recent episode, Season 11, Episode 28, I noticed one thing missing from Martin's experimentation with Chromium OS installations. Crouton. I was wondering if there's a reason you didn't go down the Crouton route when looking into running Linux applications. I've successfully installed and used Crouton on several devices. Some of them were OEM Chrome OS devices and some laptops with Cloud Ready installed on them. There were some quirks, but overall it worked really well. If you're up for experimenting more, this is a functional way to have both Chrome OS and a Linux distro on a laptop. What's the point of this? I don't know. I can see it being really neat when Cloud Ready or other Chromium OS builds support Android apps.
So yes, I am aware of Crouton, and I've used it in the past, but I was specifically interested in using Crostini, which is sort of the officially endorsed successor to Crouton. Crouton was kind of a community project that sort of got sort of Google support along the way, and Crostini is the evolution of that, and I really wanted to try that out. And obviously, if you listened to the episode a couple of weeks ago, failed miserably, given that the Chromium OS distributions I was testing didn't support it. Although at the Belgium sprint last week, a colleague of ours, Stefan Graeber, who's like the lead maintainer for LexD and has been working with Google on Crostini, demoed this so we could see it running on an actual Chromebook. And it's a little bit more flexible because you can have multiple LexD containers and you can actually get under the hood and manipulate those containers. So hopefully Cloud Ready or Arnold the Bat's version will deliver this at some point, and we can have some more fun with that.
Mark Tessier emailed us.
My ears perked up when you were discussing Chrome OS and Chromium OS. I'd like to offer another perspective on that use case, if I may. Chromebooks are cheap, light, and have a long battery life, and many of them look like Ultrabooks. They also do about 90% of what an average computer user needs without any fiddling. The addition of Android apps brings games and app ecosystem that many users are already comfortable with. Linux support has the potential to bring support for larger apps like LibreOffice. Sure, techies like you or I could take an old laptop and install Linux on it, but it seems to me that people these days are becoming adverse to basic things like installing an operating system and finding drivers, etc. I do, however, think that the addition of Linux app support on Chrome OS will help bring awareness of Linux to many users who otherwise never had the occasion to use it directly. We live in interesting times.
Dr. Hoo Grub commented on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/Ubuntu podcast.
You have inspired me to respond about Cloud Ready. I use Cloud Ready on an old compact with 2 gig of RAM and a slow hard drive. Flatpaks are available to install on the latest version, so I've installed Ramina and use it at work to RDP into the work server. I'm not in IT, but in the cleaning industry, Cloud Ready is just much faster than any of the other light distros I've tried. It works perfectly and boots in around 15 seconds, where the other distros take around 2 minutes or more. That's a good point. Booting fast and as like a client to an RDP server is a good point.
It's just a utility device at that point. Turn it on, use it.
Yep.
vLinux commented on our subreddit /r/Ubuntu podcast.
Regarding Chrome OS, back when Google launched Chrome OS, they gave out a few thousand of the original CR48 Chromebooks, and I managed to get one. At the time, I was in college, and it was an amazing OS laptop for taking to class for notes and stuff. All-day battery life, instant suspend and resume, etc. I now have a Dell tablet that came with Windows 10, and it runs Linux well too. I've been experimenting with Arnold the Bat's Chromium OS as well on this tablet, and I'll be really excited when they get Linux and Android app support working right. My main reason for wanting Chromium OS on this tablet instead of just regular Linux is mainly because of the touchscreen interface. I currently run GNOME since it seems to currently have the best touchscreen support. However, it's still not great for touchscreen. The way I see it, Chromium OS would be the best of all worlds for me on this tablet if Linux and Android app support can be worked out. It would provide a more touch-optimized interface with the ability to run Android apps, as well as the full Chrome browser with support for extensions and any Linux apps that I could want to run as well. Yeah, the thing about touchscreen is interesting because the one thing that worked really well when I installed Chromium OS was the touchscreen, and sadly it was the touchpad that was a little bit janky.
Yeah, he mentioned the CR48 Chromebook. I have one of those as well. And
does it still work?
Yes, but you don't get any updates because there's no more Chrome updates because I think it's a 32-bit processor. So right. It's stopped getting it. It did get some updates, but not anymore, which is a shame.
Next, Musa Moreno Marcuso Manheas left a comment on Season 11, Episode 26.
Hey there, I just listened to Episode 24 again, and I heard about someone having problems generating configuration files automatically. I don't know if it helps, but I really like using Yasha, a code generator based on Ginger 2. I use it also to generate YAML files for certain projects I have, and it can be used as a command line call in a really easy way. I hope it's useful to anyone.
Yeah, this is feedback about our conversation. Someone was asking about how to configure NetPlan YAMLs.
Interesting. I'll take a look at that as well. I'm all about the YAMLs.
And finally, it's time for Feedback Loop. And Rajat Pandita emailed us with more information about the thermal throttling issue.
Firstly, thanks for including my feedback again on the show. I've listened to the latest show, episode 28. I've since investigated further and found something interesting. I thought I should share it with you and seek your suggestions. I've been facing occasional throttling again, even after disabling Thermal D. It's a lot less though. Before I could go crazy and log a bug against Thermal D, I investigated further and found that Ubuntu comes with a package called IRQ Balance installed by default, and I have found out that IRQ Balance is not part of the Linux kernel. It's designed for special server configurations with many storage controllers. Any user space application cannot get 100% CPU resources on any thread because it's always sharing resources with I/O tasks. After reading this, I removed the package and I see the issue is completely gone. I enabled Thermal D and I see no more throttling. It seems like it was actually IRQ Balance and not Thermal D that caused the throttling. Thermal D is not the culprit. IRQ Balance is. What package do I file the bug against?
I would say both. In Launchpad, it's possible to log a bug and cite multiple projects as potentially being affected by this bug. And if you choose Thermal D and IRQ Balance, and the excellent information that you've gathered over the last 6 weeks of Ubuntu podcast feedback, if you put all of that in there, it will help the maintainers of those packages determine which of the packages actually needs investigation and where the bug might reside.
Excellent. And that is all for this bumper feedback.
Are you listening to us on our Roku channel? Help other Roku users find the Ubuntu podcast and learn more about open source by giving our channel a star rating.
And that is all for episode 30. God, we're racking up the numbers there, aren't we?
Yeah, God blimey, it's nearly Christmas. It's like 90 something days till Christmas. Sophie keeps telling me every morning how many days it is till Christmas.
Is that because you've given away that it annoys you?
No, I've given away that's when we stop recording the podcast.
Oh dear. We should organise some sort of Christmas curry, shouldn't we?
Definitely time for that.
Or pantomime.
Are you right?
No, you won't. There it is.
Did you actually used to do Ubuntu podcast pantomimes?
Did you not hear the Ubuntu podcast pantomimes?
Oh, no we didn't.